3 words. That's all it took. 3 words in an internal Nike memo that corporate executives never wanted you to see. Terminate effective immediately. And just like that, one of the biggest sponsorship deals in women's basketball history went up in flames. But here's what's truly insane about this whole situation. This wasn't about missed shots. This wasn't about injuries. This wasn't about poor performance on the court. No, this was about something far more damaging. Something that started with a suitcase and ended with Nike scrambling to protect a billion-dollar brand before the walls came crashing down. Now, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened, step by step, document by document, because what you're about to discover reveals something far bigger than just one athlete losing a shoe deal. This exposes how corporations really operate behind closed doors when their investments stop making sense. Let me set the stage for you. It's early 2025. Paige Bueckers is everywhere. Unrivaled league, Lego partnerships, Nike signature athlete status, magazine covers, social media buzz. On paper, she's positioned as the next face of women's basketball. But there's a massive problem. The numbers weren't adding up. And I'm not talking about points per game. I'm talking about the only numbers that matter to publicly traded corporations answerable to shareholders, sales figures. You see, while everyone was celebrating these massive endorsement deals and talking about how Paige Bueckers was going to revolutionize the women's game, marketing executives in boardrooms across America were staring at spreadsheets with increasingly worried expressions. Her Nike signature logo, that paint bucket design that looked like it was created during a lunch break. It wasn't moving merchandise. Her WNBA debut on N 639,000 viewers on a network most Americans couldn't find with a map and a flashlight. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark's Wilson basketball was selling out in 48 hours. Her signature shoes gone in minutes. Her rookie debut too. 12 million viewers on ESPN. Do you see the gap here? This isn't a small difference. This is a canyon, a massive, undeniable chasm between manufactured hype and genuine consumer demand. And Nike saw it, too. But here's where things get interesting. Because losing money on an athlete, that happens. Companies write off bad investments all the time. It's embarrassing, but it's survivable. What's not survivable is a scandal. What's not recoverable is when your signature athlete becomes associated with something that threatens your brand image. And that's exactly what happened. The suitcase incident didn't start as headline news. It started as whispers, internal discussions, quiet meetings behind closed doors. By the time it reached the media, the decision had already been made. But what was actually in that suitcase? What triggered such an immediate response from one of the world's largest athletic brands? That's what we're going to unpack in this video. Because the official statements you've seen, they're corporate damage control. Carefully worded press releases designed to protect shareholders and minimize liability. The truth is far more complicated and honestly far more revealing about how the entire sports marketing industry actually works. You're going to understand why corporations were willing to throw millions at athletes who couldn't generate returns. You're going to see the exact moment Nike realized their investment was a disaster. And you're going to witness what happens when the carefully constructed narrative finally collapses. But first, we need to go back to where this all started. Back to when Nike made the decision that would eventually cost them millions. Back to when the warning signs were already there, flashing bright red. And everyone chose to ignore them because this story isn't just about Paige Bueckers. This story is about what happens when corporations choose politics over profit. And receipts, they're devastating. Let's rewind to January 2024. Nike executives are sitting in a conference room in Beaverton, Oregon. Charts on the wall, projections on screens, marketing teams presenting their strategy for women's basketball. And right at the center of that strategy, Paige Bueckers. The plan was simple. At least it seems simple on paper. Sign Bueckers early. Lock her in before the WNBA draft. Position her as the face of Nike women's basketball for the next decade. Create a signature shoe line. Dominate the market. Easy, right? Except there was one massive problem nobody wanted to address. The consumer data was screaming something different. You see, while Nike's marketing team was building mood boards and designing logos, the analytics department was pulling numbers that should have stopped this deal in its tracks. Social media engagement modest at best. Nowhere near the viral moments that drive actual merchandise sales. Jersey sales during her college career, solid for UConn, but nothing that suggested crossover appeal to casual fans. Television ratings when she played, good for women's college basketball, but a fraction of what another player was generating just a few states away in Iowa. And that player's name kept coming up in every single meeting. Caitlin Clark. Here's what you need to understand about corporate sponsorship deals. Companies don't just pay athletes because they are talented. Talent is table stakes. Talent gets you in the door. Talent means nothing if you can't move product. What corporations pay for his influence, cultural penetration, the ability to make average consumers who don't even watch basketball suddenly care about your brand. And by every measurable metric, Caitlin Clark had that in abundance. Her games were events, sports center highlights, water, cooler conversations. Parents who hadn't watched women's basketball in decades were suddenly tuning in. That's not marketing spin. That's documented reality. So, why did Nike go all in on Clark? This is where it gets uncomfortable because the answer reveals something about corporate decision-making that executives will never admit publicly. They didn't choose Bueckers because the data supported it. They chose Bueckers because choosing Clark felt too obvious. Let me explain. In corporate America, there's immense pressure to appear progressive. To make decisions that will generate positive headlines in certain publications to avoid being criticized for simply following market demand. Nike had already been burned by controversies. Colin Kaepernick, various athlete scandals. They were sensitive about public perception in ways that sometimes overrode pure business logic. And Caitlin Clark, for all her obvious marketability, came with perceived risk. She was too popular with the wrong demographics in the eyes of certain marketing executives. Her fan base skewed in directions that made boardroom progressives uncomfortable. So they hedged. They signed Clark to a deal. Sure. But they didn't give her the signature treatment. They didn't build campaigns around her dominance. Instead, they elevated Bueckers. They created the paint bucket logo. They announced partnership after partnership designed to manufacture the star power that Clark had organically generated. It was a calculated bet, and it was absolutely the wrong one. But here's where the suitcase enters the picture. Because Nike could have survived a bad marketing bet. They've made plenty of those over the years. You take the loss, you adjust strategy, you move forward. What Nike couldn't survive was what happened in early 2025. What they couldn't ignore was what was discovered during a routine compliance review of their sponsored athletes. See, when you're a Nike signature athlete, you're not just representing yourself. You're representing a brand worth over $50 billion. There are clauses in those contracts, morality provisions, behavioral expectations, and there are things that trigger immediate termination, things that corporate legal teams move on with zero hesitation. The suitcase incident didn't become public immediately. It started as an internal matter. A report filed, questions asked, investigations launched. By the time the media caught wind, the decision was already made. But what exactly happened? What was in that suitcase that made Nike pull the plug so fast? The answer is more shocking than you might expect. And it connects to a pattern of behavior that had been quietly documented for months. Before I tell you about the suitcase, you need to understand something crucial. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was the final straw in a pattern that Nike's compliance team had been tracking for months. See, when major corporations sign athletes to multi-million-dollar deals, they don't just hand over a check and walk away. They monitor everything. Social media posts, public appearances, travel records, association networks. It sounds invasive because it is invasive, but there's a reason for it. One wrong association, one problematic connection, one viral moment that contradicts brand values, and suddenly a company's stock price takes a hit. Nike learned this the hard way multiple times. So when they signed Paige Bueckers, they assigned a full compliance team, regular check-ins, quarterly reviews, the works, and for the first few months, everything looked fine. She was doing the media rounds, practicing with Unrivaled, building relationships with other players, standard stuff. But then the reports started coming in. The first flag was small, a missed appearance, a scheduled Nike promotional event in Dallas that she simply didn't show up for. The excuse? Travel complications. Nike accepted it, rescheduled, moved on. The second flag was bigger. A social media post that violated brand guidelines. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to trigger a warning letter from the legal department. Again, Bueckers apologized, said it wouldn't happen again. Nike accepted it. But here's what they didn't know at the time. Behind the scenes, something else was developing. Something that connected to individuals Nike absolutely could not afford to be associated with. Now, I want to be very clear about something. Paige Bueckers is an incredible basketball player. Her skills on the court are undeniable. She won a national championship. She dominated college basketball for years. Her talent was never in question. But talent doesn't protect you from contractual obligations. And talent doesn't insulate corporations from reputational risk. When Nike's team discover what was happening, they face an immediate decision. Quietly end the partnership and hope nobody notices, or wait and risk becoming part of a story they couldn't control. They chose option 1. The termination notice went out on a Tuesday morning, effective immediately. No press conference, no formal announcement, just a quiet severing of ties that corporate communications hope would fly under the radar. But nothing stays quiet in the age of social media. Within hours, people noticed that Nike had scrubbed Bueckers from their website. The promotional materials disappeared. The signature logo that had just been revealed gone. And that's when the question started. Reporters began calling. Influencers started speculating, and someone somewhere leaked information about a suitcase. Now, let's talk about what that actually means. The term suitcase scandal sounds dramatic. And honestly, it is dramatic, but not in the way you might think. This wasn't about illegal contents. This wasn't about contraband at airports. This was about documentation, specifically documentation that revealed financial arrangements Nike knew nothing about. See, when you're a signature athlete with a major brand, you have disclosure requirements, side deals, promotional arrangements, anything that could create a conflict of interest or brand confusion. You have to tell them it's in the contract. Clear as day. And according to sources inside Nike's compliance department, what they discovered was a series of undisclosed arrangements that violated multiple provisions of Bueckers' agreement, arrangements that connected the companies Nike considered direct competitors. Arrangements that had been hidden in ways that suggested intentional concealment. The suitcase reference that came from how the documentation was discovered during a routine review of travel records and associated receipts. Physical documents in an era of digital everything kept separate from electronic records for a reason. When Nike's legal team saw what they were dealing with, the decision became simple. This wasn't just a contract violation. This was a trust violation. And in the world of corporate sponsorships, trust is everything. You can recover from poor sales. You can recover from bad marketing decisions. You can even recover from minor scandals if you handle them correctly. But you cannot recover from an athlete who deliberately hid information that could damage your brand.